Recently, I spoke to a few friends of mine who happen to be aspiring entrepreneurs who are planning to launch new businesses next year, and were inquiring about how to promote it on social media, but without doing so on video because they don't really like that sort of thing. I told them I had the perfect solution. Start with a podcast. Now, they were a little concerned about what all went into it, so I explained to them how Spotify for Podcasters makes it simple, as you can record, edit, schedule, and grow your community all from your phone or from your computer or whatever else you want to use. Plus, if they wanted to monetize it, Spotify will even go out and find them advertisers. And the craziest part is, they do all this for free. So if you're like my friends, stop wasting time, start making money today by heading over to spotify.com/podcasters or download the Spotify for Podcasters app today. Hey guys, Akil here. Today, I'm going to share with you what I'll be doing this year for my continued education. Now, before we continue with the podcast, do me a favor, make sure you leave me a rating or a review on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. We're consistently ranked as one of the top trading podcasts out there, and I need your help to keep pushing up that ladder and keep climbing towards the top. So wherever you're listening to this at, leave me a rating, leave me a review, 5 stars if you think I'm worth it. That is a big help and a big thank you in advance. So, continued education. What exactly is continued education? Well, continued education is something that I've done ever since becoming a consistently profitable trader, and I've done it for 2 reasons. One, right, I am so fearful, right? I know how the market changes. I've heard so many war stories from very successful traders that all of a sudden the light switch has gone out and they've lost their success. And one of my biggest fears, and I guess you can say my biggest motivator, is losing my mojo, right? To go back to Austin Powers, right? I don't want to lose my mojo. I don't want to spend what's been, over a decade and a half now, kind of building my perfect life from trading and honestly having everything, not everything rely on trading, but a main source of my income, right? Rely on trading. I don't all of a sudden want to kind of be bad at it and have to do something else. I don't know what else I can do in life if it's not make money, extract money from the financial market. So a big fear of mine is losing this skill and losing the ability to provide for myself and provide for my family. So for me to combat that, I always have to stay sharp. I always have to stay up to date. I always want to try to become better at what I'm doing. Number 2 is that I've always believed that trading is this puzzle. This is what encourages me to trade. Trading is this puzzle where you can imagine there's a whole bunch of pieces laid out on the floor. And, I feel like we'll never find all of the pieces to completely complete the puzzle. But each and every day we come into the market and we look for different pieces, and maybe we find one here, we find one there, and we get closer and closer. And that's very encouraging. The thing is, trading is interesting because, it's also like an amusement park with, endless amounts of rides. There are so many different strategies and techniques and tools that you can use to be a consistently profitable trader. And even if you aren't going to use all of them, I think it's cool to learn about the different things out there. And in the past, I've done multiple things. When I was very, newer as a trader, my continued education period would be spent with taking training courses, right? When I got, when I was consistently profitable, but still in that phase where I would go through some kind of psychological messes each year. A part of my continued education would be reviewing my old training courses, the ones that my coaches and mentors took me, like literally going through the entire thing and just sharpening up. I still do that to this day. Continued education could be other things, such as reading a book, talking to another professional trader, face to face, something like that. Something just to kind of work on yourself each and every year. And this year, I've decided to embark on a journey that really follows up on the journey that I went on for the past 2 years, right? So 2 years ago, I embarked on a journey to learn more about volume, right? I've told the story many times before, so I'll keep it short, but volume was something, and things change as technology changes, right? So volume is something that I ignored very early on in my trading career. It did not make sense to me because of specifically how the Forex market works. Volume isn't a real number, and I didn't want to base any of my decisions in the market off of something that wasn't real. It just didn't make sense. And over time, between speaking with different traders and again, technology and really the landscape of Forex specifically changing, where the amount of Forex brokers and data providers really shrunk up as all the scammers and schemers kind of got knocked out of the market and more regulations came in. Volume became something that was a little bit more intriguing. So, year one, I invested in a book. It was a book by, I'm going to forget the name now, but the author was Anna Cooling. I think it's called A Complete Guide to Volume Analysis or Volume Price Analysis. It was a really good book. I like Anna Cooling's work. It was recommended to me and it did not disappoint. And reading that book not only taught me about volume, it allowed me to really interpret supply and demand in a much different way as well, which has really helped me to this day in how I view and understand the markets. So I spent, I don't want to say a year, but when I do my continuing education, I basically give myself about 6 weeks, right? It starts right around this time, right? Beginning of December, and it typically goes to about mid-January, right? I always say I'm going to stop January 1st, but I'm never finished by then. So I kind of go carries on a little bit. And the first year I read that book. And then what I did was I kind of followed up and interpreted and followed through on the things of that book throughout the year. And then the next year I came back to it and started actually practically applying what I learned in that book. So you think about 1 year is just educating myself, a second year of kind of like building a hypothesis of how I wanted to use the knowledge that I have, and then actually practically applying it to the market, watching it, tracking it, collecting data, all that fun stuff, until it became something that was usable and is now usable in my trading. Well, I want to follow it up this year with another book. And this is a book by another author and trader that I highly respect. His name is Brian Shannon from, I think it's called Alpha Trends is his company. I apologize if I messed that up. I think it's either Alpha Trends or Alpha Trades, but I'm pretty sure it's Alpha Trends. So Brian Shannon is an author that I followed for a very long time now. I actually have one of his older books called Technical Analysis Using Multiple Time Frames, right? I probably never mentioned it to you guys, but you guys have seen the library in the back. I have a handful of books. Some of them get lost in the sauce where you guys always ask me for my top three, and maybe it doesn't make the top three in that specific category, but that doesn't mean it's a bad book. Good book, lots of information, wacky cover, but very easy to interpret as well. And he released a new book called Anchored VWAP, The Perfect Combination of Price, Time, and Volume. And VWAP, VWAP, right, is the volume weighted average price. And kind of simplify it, think about it like this, right? Think about it as essentially being a moving average that takes volume into account, right? So it's weighted by volume. And in the book, I haven't read it yet, right? I literally just ordered it a couple of seconds ago before kind of putting on the podcast thing or hitting play on the microphone. But essentially what I believe he's looking at in this book is a different type of VWAP indicator, right? The initial VWAP indicator, I remember speaking to Mike Bellafiore about this in the past. I never really gave it any interest because VWAP, there we go. What it does was it essentially kind of restarts every day, right? So every day or every session, I should say, is a new VWAP. And for me, who does the majority of my trading on a daily chart and a 4-hour chart, doesn't really have too much purpose because of the timeliness of the session. Well, something cool about this anchored VWAP is that we can actually kind of decide where we want to anchor it to. So if there is a specific high volume session or a specific kind of high momentum session or a news event, something like that, or any area that you see on the chart that is deemed worthy, I'm sure I'll learn more about kind of some tips and tricks of the specifics in the book. I can anchor the VWAP to that, which can provide me a lot of information. And that's a little bit different than what I've heard about in the past when it comes to the volume weighted average price. Now, the cool thing about this is, again, I followed up on it because, well, now that volume has actually made its way into my trading arsenal is something that, again, it's going to be weird hearing this if you listen to my stuff like 10 years ago, but it is something that I heavily value in my trading. Has helped me become a lot more kind of efficient and effective in my entries in my profit taking. Well, now it only makes sense, since I do believe in this thing, to see, hey, what else can I get out of it, right? Knowing that I'm not a big moving average fan in its own right, but when you take a moving average and you kind of anchor it to something that is important to me, maybe there's a little bit more of this nugget that I can get out of here. Maybe there's a little bit more juice that I can squeeze. Maybe I can combine this or team this with how I'm already using volume and my other tools to kind of decide decision points in the market specifically for entry. Maybe this can add just another little tidbit, percentage, I guess you can say, to my trading edge. And that's what you'll notice as you get older in trading, right? I used this reference the other day. Think about your edge or your progression as being like dividing something in half. When you start with a very big number, 100, and you divide it in half, it's a big jump. You go from 100 to 50. And then when you divide 50 by half, right, you get a kind of medium jump. You go from 50 to 25. And when you divide 25 by half, you get a kind of a smaller jump. You go from 25 to 12.5. And although you're increasing your edge, or I guess, division decreasing, but you guys get the point. Although you're increasing your edge, right, and you're progressing, it gets harder and harder, right, to progress by more and more, right? It's very similar to like an indicator or oscillator. You look at like a RSI, for example. It's easier for the RSI to move from 50 to 80 than it is from 80 to 90. And that's what ends up happening with your edge as a trader, right? And I think a lot of traders get discouraged by it because when they're new traders, they're doing lots of things and they probably suck, right? So when you suck, you're doing all these things wrong. And then you finally find something that brings you out of the suck. It could be technical, it could be psychological, probably a little bit of both. And all of a sudden you go from like someone that was losing 10% a year to, man, I just made 15% the next year, right? A 25% swing. And then maybe you figure something else out and now you're like, man, I just went from a 15% return on investment to a 35% to a 50%. And now it's crazy. And then you kind of think doing the same stuff. Okay, I'm going to go from 50, I'm going up by 25% a year. I'm going to go from 50 to 75. And you make some change and now you look at your back testing, however you do it, right? And now you go from 50 to like 51. And it's harder, right? Because you're basically getting closer and closer to that ceiling. So think about that with your edge and your progression. That's how I think about my edge and my progression. I am pretty much, I don't want to say maxed out, but I am closer to the ceiling than I am to the floor as far as my trading goes. It took a long time to get there, but I'm consistently there, and I can tell by how my numbers don't change too much and as I get more efficient with what I'm doing. However, if I can find one little thing that can just inch me 1% higher, closer to that ceiling, that is a move in the positive direction. And just like we mentioned in that podcast the other day, where I had you draw out the dot on the right hand side of your paper and then adjust it by 1 degree and draw that straight line. If I can do that on a consistent basis, it doesn't seem like much at first, but over time, it is going to push me and progress me in a positive direction. So Anchored VWAP by the official title, Maximum Trading Gains with Anchored VWAP, the perfect combination of price, time, and volume by Brian Shannon. That's going to be my December continued education project. I look forward to keeping you guys updated. And for you guys that are on the platform, you guys that are in the live room, you're probably going to see me play around with some of the stuff in there. So you'll get the, just like volume, you'll get to see me kind of live this experience live, however long it lasts. Hey, so speaking of continued education, if you're someone that's either looking for continued education or maybe you're new and struggling and you just need education in general, check out our website, www.tier1trading.com. We work with traders of all different levels, brand spanking new to struggling to successful, and people that just want a community. So check it out. I recommend the 14-day risk-free trial membership that gives you 14 days on the platform. You can play around with stuff. You can join some live sessions. You can take some courses, all for zero risk. And what I mean by that is there's no sneaky auto bill. Once your subscription is done, it just deletes and cancels and you don't pay anything, right? So www.tier1trading.com. Check it out, and I'll see you guys over there.